When Jungkook is threatened in America, Taehyung's explosive response unravels a dark web of secrets, loyalty, and vengeance. The red dot on his chest. "Get down now!" screamed a stranger as the laser dot danced over Jungkook's heart. The chaos erupted in the middle of Times Square, bright neon lights slicing through the fog of early night, while thousands of tourists cheered and shuffled around Jungkook without knowing a sniper had locked onto him. His security team was seconds late, but in those seconds, Jungkook froze. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. Not when a red beam of light hovered between his ribs. Not when the static in his earpiece screamed into his ear. And not when he heard a child giggling beside him, unaware of the blood about to spill. The bullet never came, but that moment, one breathless fragment of time fractured him. Later, in a dim hotel room, Jungkook stood in front of a mirror, shirtless, his chest still tingling as if the laser had burned through his skin. He stared at the faint circle the beam had marked. There was no physical wound, but something had lodged deep inside him. Fear? No, not fear. Something else. Something colder. Taehyung's voice came through the phone, groggy with sleep and time difference. "What do you mean someone tried to shoot you?" he said, his voice flat but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. "They didn't shoot," Jungkook replied. "But they could have." There was a pause. A long one. Taehyung wasn't known for silence, but this one was loaded. Then, "Send me everything. Now. CCTV, street layout, security reports. I want names." Jungkook didn't answer. He was staring at a handwritten envelope on the table. It had arrived hours before the laser incident. No return address. Just one line. "You should have stayed in Seoul. You're not safe here." It wasn't the first, but it was the first that came with a near-death experience. The next morning, the hotel lobby was surrounded by NYPD and private security, flashing lights and cameras, confused fans being herded away. Jungkook wore a hoodie, sunglasses, and silence. He hated this part, the performance of pretending to be okay. But as his car sped through the streets of Manhattan, he realized something unnerving. He wasn't scared. He was angry. Behind tinted windows, he unsealed another envelope that had been slid under his door during the night. This one wasn't a threat. It was a photo. Him, asleep. The angle overhead. From inside the room. A caption in red ink. "Next time I won't miss." Across the ocean, Taehyung canceled his schedule without permission. He didn't tell management. He didn't tell his assistant. He just boarded a flight to New York with one carry-on and two phones, one personal, one untraceable. In the air, he replayed the phone call again and again, his jaw tightening. Jungkook didn't know the truth. Not yet, because 3 years ago, Taehyung had made someone disappear. And now, that someone might be back. When Taehyung arrived at JFK, he wasn't dressed like a global icon. No designer labels. No entourage, just a long black coat, eyes hidden beneath a cap, and a fury so contained it felt like poison in a glass jar. He didn't go to the hotel. He went straight to the rooftop across from it. The wind whipped against him as he stared across the skyline, finding the exact line of sight where a sniper could have aimed. His fingers tightened on the railing. He noted the fire escape, the adjacent windows, the blinking camera that had been tampered with. He checked his second phone. There was a message waiting. A string of numbers coordinates. No name. Just the symbol of a chess piece. The Black Knight. His hands trembled, but not from fear. Memories returned. Unwelcome. The abandoned warehouse in Busan. The sound of a scream that never made it to air. The man in the mask. The promise Taehyung made to never let it touch Jungkook. He had buried that chapter, but someone was digging it up. Back at the hotel, Jungkook was being questioned by the police. He was calm, cooperative, almost too quiet. A detective leaned in and whispered, "Is there someone you trust who might know more about your past? Anyone with enemies?" Jungkook blinked slowly. A memory surfaced. Taehyung, soaked in blood, eyes wild, breathing like a beast, whispering, "You didn't see anything. Forget this ever happened." "Yeah," Jungkook said at last. "There's someone." That night, Taehyung entered the hotel room without knocking. The guards didn't stop him. They didn't even see him. Jungkook was sitting by the window. "You came," he said. "I never left," Taehyung answered, closing the door. Their eyes met. Not as friends, not as idols, but as two people haunted by a shared shadow. Then Taehyung tossed something onto the table, a bullet, crushed and warped. "I found this in the wall behind your bed," he said. "This wasn't a warning." Jungkook leaned forward. "So it's real." "It's worse than real," Taehyung whispered. "It's personal." Outside, New York buzzed on, indifferent. But inside that hotel room, the storm had begun. The rain began to fall in sheets, streaking the glass windows like silent fingers clawing their way down the surface, each drop echoing the tension that hung heavy in the room. Jungkook stood, his bare feet against the cold hotel floor, staring at the bullet on the table. The warped metal seemed to vibrate in his vision, not with motion but with memory, a reminder that someone had crossed the line. A line he didn't even know was there. Taehyung sat opposite him, silent, composed, but Jungkook could see it, his hands clenched too tightly, his breathing shallow beneath the stillness. There was a fire in Taehyung's eyes he hadn't seen in years. Not since that night in Busan. Not since... "Do you think it's him?" Jungkook asked, his voice low. Taehyung didn't answer immediately. He turned his head slightly, watching the red digits on the digital clock blink slowly. Then he nodded once. "If it is, he's changed. He doesn't want to scare you, Jungkook. He wants to break you." The words struck like glass under skin. Jungkook blinked, then lowered himself into the armchair, as if the weight of everything had just doubled. "I don't understand. I've done nothing. I haven't talked to anyone, haven't wronged anyone." "Not you," Taehyung said. "Me." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of unsaid things, of broken promises, of blood that had dried and names that had been forgotten on purpose. Jungkook remembered the way Taehyung had once come home with a cracked knuckle and hollow eyes, claiming he slipped during rehearsal. The lie had been so elegant, so simple. Jungkook had believed it. Maybe he had wanted to believe it. "Tell me what you did," Jungkook said finally, his voice edged with both fear and fury. But Taehyung only stood and walked to the window. "There's no time for that right now. I need you to focus. If this is who I think it is, you were never the target. You were always the message." Jungkook stood too, walking over, standing beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "Then what does the message say?" Taehyung turned, looked Jungkook in the eye. "That I failed. That he's back. That I have something to lose now, and he knows it." Jungkook didn't flinch. He didn't ask the obvious question, because deep down, he knew the answer. There had been a night, years ago, when everything had changed. Taehyung had disappeared for 3 days. No calls, no texts, nothing but a cryptic voicemail. "Don't look for me. I'll come back when it's done." When he returned, his wrist had been stitched, his ribs bruised, and there was a look in his eyes that stayed for months, like he was somewhere else. Now, standing here in a hotel in Manhattan, that same look had returned, and Jungkook knew whatever was coming. It wasn't random. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Taehyung was already reaching for his phone. A message came through on the untraceable line, encrypted, silent. He opened it, and Jungkook leaned over his shoulder. It was another photo. Jungkook on stage tonight singing, lights blazing around him. Only, in the photo, there was a silhouette in the rafters above, barely visible. But there, the caption read, "Encore?" Jungkook felt his stomach twist. "They were in the building," he whispered. Taehyung's jaw tensed. "And they're not done." That night, Taehyung moved them out of the hotel, not to another luxury suite, but a nameless, nondescript brownstone in the Bronx owned by a man who owed Taehyung a favor. No cameras, no digital footprint. He made calls to contacts. Jungkook didn't know he had voices with thick Russian, French, and Indonesian accents answered in code. While Jungkook sat in a dusty room with nothing but a single lamp and an old armchair, Taehyung orchestrated a silent war. He didn't tell Jungkook what he was doing. He didn't have to, Because Jungkook had begun to remember the way Taehyung had always shielded him from things he didn't want to see. The way he always knew when something was about to go wrong. The night in Tokyo, when their van had been rerouted minutes before a gas explosion destroyed the highway they were meant to be on. The way a man in Berlin had reached for Jungkook's arm and ended up unconscious with a broken wrist, Taehyung claiming it was reflex. Jungkook began to connect the dots. And the picture it painted wasn't of two idols navigating fame. It was of one man protecting another from a threat that never truly left. At dawn, Taehyung returned from a meeting. He smelled like smoke and cold air, and his knuckles were red again. "He has people here," Taehyung said, removing his coat. "Mercenaries, ex-military. This isn't just one man, it's a cell." Jungkook stood. "Then we go to the police. They can't help us." "Why not?" Taehyung looked at him. "Because I'm the reason they're here." There it was again. That cold guilt in his voice, like he'd been waiting to be punished for years. "Tell me, Tae. Tell me everything." So Taehyung did. He told Jungkook about the man called Oren, real name, unknown, a ghost who operated in the underground arms circuit. Years ago, during a charity trip to Jakarta, Taehyung had uncovered something he wasn't supposed to see. A shipment of weapons disguised as medical supplies. When he had tried to report it, he was silenced, threatened, but he didn't back down. Instead, he dismantled it from the inside. He used fake identities, digital leaks, forged alliances, and it worked. The operation collapsed, but Oren vanished before he could be caught. Now he was back. Not for Taehyung, but for the one thing Taehyung had always protected. "Jungkook, I ended his empire," Taehyung said, his voice raw. "Now he wants to burn mine down." Jungkook sat down, absorbing the weight of it all. "So what do?" "We don't run," Taehyung said. "We end it." The next 3 days were a blur. Taehyung trained Jungkook in hand signals, emergency codes, escape routes. He turned the brownstone into a command center, complete with surveillance taps and analog communication boards. He hacked, he listened, he tracked, and Jungkook changed. He stopped being the protected. He became the weapon. Together, they hunted the hunters. The first was a man posing as a barista in Soho. Taehyung spotted the military stance, the earpiece, the subtle reach for his back pocket. Jungkook distracted while Taehyung disarmed. No one saw a thing. The second was a woman who sat outside the rehearsal studio every day with a camera. Her photos weren't for fans, they were blueprints. Escape plans, weaknesses. They confronted her at night. She said nothing, but her eyes said enough. Each takedown brought them closer to Oren. And then, one night, Jungkook received a video. Taehyung, bound to a chair, bleeding, silent. Jungkook's heart cracked open. The caption, "He protected you. Will you protect him?" Jungkook had always been seen as the innocent, the golden boy, the one who smiled and sang and danced through pain. But that night, something inside him snapped. He tracked the video's metadata, used everything Taehyung had taught him, cross-referenced the sound of dripping water with subway tunnel maps, matched the lighting in the video to blueprints of old maintenance depots, and he found it. An abandoned freight terminal beneath the Williamsburg Bridge. He didn't tell anyone. He just went. The descent into the tunnels was slow, wet, suffocating. Rats skittered in the darkness. The smell of rust and blood choked him. But Jungkook didn't waver. He followed the trail. And when he found Taehyung, tied and bruised but alive, he acted. Oren stepped from the shadows, tall, scarred, smiling like death in a silk suit. "You came," he said, almost fondly. "The prince leaves the palace." Jungkook said nothing. He moved fast. No hesitation. A blade taken from the woman in Soho found its mark. Not fatal, but enough to distract. Enough to tip the scales. Taehyung broke free. Together, they fought. It was raw, brutal. No choreography. No glamour. Just blood, fists, and fury. When it was over, Oren lay broken. Alive, but no longer a threat. Taehyung looked at Jungkook, breathing hard. "You didn't have to come alone." "I did," Jungkook said. "You would've." Outside, The sky began to lighten. A new day. But neither of them would ever be the same, because something had changed in both of them. Jungkook was no longer just a name on a stage, and Taehyung was no longer just his shadow. They were brothers now, in blood, in battle, in truth, and the world would never see them the same way again. New York's skyline burned golden under the weight of dawn, streaking fire across the city's endless windows like a silent alarm that the night had ended, but not the war. Sirens wailed in the distance, indifferent, and the terminal beneath the Williamsburg Bridge lay in silence, its rusted walls stained, not just with age, but with memory. Taehyung limped forward, blood seeping through his shirt from a gash on his ribs, his breathing still ragged. Jungkook was beside him, equally bruised, equally changed. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The last 20 minutes had said more than any conversation ever could. Oren lay unconscious behind them, zip-tied and gagged, his face twisted with rage even as the blood dripped from his lip. He wouldn't stay down for long. We need to move him, Jungkook finally muttered, spitting a taste of iron from his mouth. If the others find this place. They won't, Taehyung said. Not in time. But Jungkook saw the flicker of doubt in his friend's eyes. This wasn't over. One man like Oren didn't operate without contingencies. If he was here, others were waiting in the wings. They dragged him out, up into the cold light of morning. The streets above were just beginning to stir. Joggers, vendors, taxis splashing puddles with apathy. The normal world had no idea that beneath their feet, a war had broken through the cracks of fame and anonymity. Back at the safe house, they tied Oren to a steel chair in the basement. The room smelled of rust, mildew, and adrenaline. There was no dramatic interrogation, no shouting, just silence. Taehyung sat across from him, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. You thought you were done with me, Oren said hoarsely, his accent like gravel. You should have killed me back then. I should have, Taehyung agreed. Jungkook stood in the corner, arms folded, his hoodie stained with blood that wasn't his. His jaw was clenched, his eyes unreadable. Something about the cold control on his face unsettled even Oren. I underestimated you, Oren added, eyes flicking toward Jungkook. The boy grew teeth. Try him again, Taehyung said, voice low, and you'll find he bites deeper than I ever did. Then what? Oren sneered. You going to kill me in your little basement? Go ahead, but you should know taking me out triggers a protocol. You won't last the week. We're not killing you, Jungkook finally spoke, stepping forward, his voice calm, terrifyingly calm. We're going to dismantle you. Taehyung smiled faintly. Piece by piece. The plan was already in motion. Jungkook had memorized the files Taehyung gave him connections, shell companies, safe houses. Every place Oren had touched, they were going to burn it to the ground. The first move was financial. Taehyung's old contact in Zurich rerouted every offshore account linked to Oren's operation into blacklisted donation channels. Millions evaporated in minutes. Then, the leaks began documents, photos, voice recordings sent to international law enforcement, private watchdogs, and journalists with enough integrity to die for a story. By noon, the name Oren was trending in encrypted forums. By nightfall, it had disappeared entirely. The digital shadow of a ghost erased by the two people he thought he could break. But Taehyung knew it wouldn't end there. He stood by the window of the safe house, watching the rain return, soft at first, then pounding. Every drop against the glass reminded him of the ticking clock. He's not the type to act alone, he murmured. Jungkook was at the table, cleaning a scratch on his forearm. Then who else is out there? The ones who didn't forget. The ones I didn't finish. There were more names. More sins buried beneath the facade of perfect stages and world tours. Taehyung had spent years protecting Jungkook from the darkness that clung to him like a second skin. Now that darkness was fighting back. The following day, someone set fire to the building across the street from the safe house. No casualties, no obvious link. But it was a message. Taehyung moved them again, this time to a contact's loft in Brooklyn, high above the skyline. It was sleek, clean, secure. But it wasn't home. Nothing was, anymore. They didn't sleep much. Jungkook spent nights poring over files, listening to intercepted audio, learning to trace IPs. He stopped being afraid of the dark. He welcomed it. Taehyung trained him how to listen, how to move, how to strike without being seen. He watched Jungkook change and hated himself for it. Hated that he dragged him into this. But there was no going back. Not anymore. One night, Taehyung stood on the rooftop, looking out at the city. Jungkook joined him, silent. You regret it? Jungkook asked. Not finishing it when you had the chance? No, Taehyung said. I regret thinking it was ever finished. They were interrupted by a knock at the door. No one knew they were here. Taehyung froze. Jungkook reached instinctively for the blade tucked into his waistband. Taehyung checked the security feed. A woman stood outside. Early 30s. Red coat. Eyes like frost. She held no weapons. But Taehyung's expression changed the moment he saw her. Who is it? Jungkook asked. Taehyung didn't answer. He just opened the door. The woman stepped inside like she belonged there. She and Taehyung locked eyes. I heard Oren's awake, she said. Thought you might need help. Jungkook watched, puzzled. You know her? Taehyung nodded. She's the one who taught me how to disappear. Her name was Liana. She had once worked with Taehyung in the Jakarta operation, long before the masks and fake names. She had been presumed dead. Now, she was back with intel. Oren's cell isn't just about revenge, she explained. He's part of something larger. A network that infiltrates corporate and celebrity systems. Extortion, smuggling, blackmail. He was the cleanup guy. Now he wants to rebuild. And we're the loose ends, Jungkook said. Exactly. Liana laid out a map: cities, dates, contacts. Jungkook recognized some. Former stylists, agents, even security guards from old tours. They had all been plants. It's deeper than we thought, Taehyung murmured. They've been close for years. They devised a plan, strike the core. Shut down the communication hub buried under a nightclub in Chicago where all intel was routed. A two-man infiltration. Taehyung and Jungkook would go. Liana would guide from afar. They moved fast. Chicago greeted them with sleet and neon. The club pulsed with bass, bodies grinding under strobes. But beneath the glamour, in a locked sublevel, was a digital nerve center manned by 5 operatives. Taehyung slipped through shadows like a whisper. Jungkook followed, heart pounding, every sense burning. When they struck, it was silent, efficient. By the time the club realized the power was gone, Taehyung had downloaded every drive, wiped every trace, and left the building smoking. But as they exited through the alley, a gunshot rang out. Jungkook stumbled. Taehyung caught him before he hit the ground. Blood spread across his side. Keep pressure, Taehyung whispered, voice shaking. You're gonna be fine. Jungkook's eyes fluttered. Tae, if I die. You're not, but if I do, don't blame yourself. Shut up, Taehyung growled. You're not allowed to die. Not tonight. He carried him out, flagged down an old contact, and got him to an off-grid medic. The bullet missed vital organs. Barely. While Jungkook recovered, Taehyung returned to New York. Oren was gone, vanished. They'd underestimated him again. But this time, they weren't afraid. Because Jungkook survived. Because they had the data. Because they knew now it wasn't just about revenge. It was about power. And Taehyung and Jungkook were done being pawns. They were coming for the king. Snow fell over Manhattan like ash, gentle at first, then harder, sweeping over the skyline in wide veils that blurred the city's edge. The night swallowed the streets below, street lamps casting yellow halos on the slush-covered sidewalks. In the loft, everything was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional sound of Jungkook turning in his sleep. Taehyung sat by the window, a cigarette burning between his fingers, smoke curling up into the ceiling like memories. He hadn't smoked in years, but tonight, he needed something to anchor himself. The cold outside matched the cold inside him. Every time he blinked, he saw Jungkook bleeding in the alley in Chicago, eyes wide with pain, breath hitching, whispering his name like it was the only word that mattered. He could have died. Taehyung pressed the cigarette out against the ashtray and stood, his joints aching, body sore from a week without sleep. He walked over to the desk, where hard drives and maps were spread like a chessboard. Each file they'd stolen, every photo, every alias, it was all here. The digital veins of Oren's empire, intricate and tangled. But they weren't just data. They were proof, evidence. And behind every line of code, there was a face, a name, a past. Jungkook stirred in the next room. Taehyung turned his head slightly, listening. The younger man hadn't spoken much since the operation. Not because of trauma, but because something in him had shifted. He wasn't the same boy Taehyung used to protect with lies and half-truths. He was becoming something else, someone who understood what it meant to walk through fire and come out scarred. When morning came, Jungkook walked into the living room slowly, his side still bandaged, his steps careful but determined. "How long was I out?" he asked, his voice rough. 3 days, Taehyung said. "Doctor came twice. You're lucky." "Lucky's a weird word for what I feel," Jungkook muttered, sitting down. He looked at the table, eyes scanning the documents. "He's still out there, isn't he?" "Yes." "And he knows we're coming?" "Yes." "Good." Taehyung raised an eyebrow. There was steel in Jungkook's voice now, steady, unshaken. He didn't ask to go back. He didn't want to run. He wanted to finish it. And maybe that terrified Taehyung more than anything. They spent the next 48 hours building a new plan. Liana returned, bringing a laptop that couldn't be traced, burner phones, and a trail of encrypted communications from what remained of Oren's inner circle. Taehyung had been right. Oren wasn't just rebuilding his old empire. He was buying his way into another, a darker, deeper network that operated like a ghost beneath global systems. Governments, corporations, tech firms, nothing was safe from their touch. The name appeared in several conversations. Nocturne, a code name. A myth whispered among black market circles. No one knew if it was a person, a group, or a system. But it was clear Oren was trying to offer someone up to gain access. Jungkook. That was the price of admission. Taehyung gritted his teeth when the connection became clear. Oren had something no one else did. Access to a public figure loved by millions. If Jungkook was compromised, even the illusion of control would ripple like a virus through fans, networks, agencies. One leak, one manipulation, and the world would become a weapon. They had to stop it. But they couldn't just destroy Oren anymore. They had to find Nocturne, understand it, disarm it from within, which meant infiltration.
Liana set up a meeting with one of Oren's former lieutenants, Dax, a broker of information who now lived in exile under a new identity in Montreal. They flew under aliases, landed in the dead of night, and found him in a crumbling industrial complex by the waterfront, surrounded by rusted metal and the ghosts of old trains. Dax didn't smile when he saw them. "I thought you were dead," he told Taehyung. "Not yet," Taehyung replied, "but you might be if you keep stalling." Dax swallowed hard. He was thinner than his photos, grayer but still sharp. "I heard what happened in Chicago. You stirred the hornet's nest." "I want the queen," Jungkook said quietly. Dax blinked. "He talks now." Jungkook stepped closer, "And I act too." Dax led them through a maze of crates and metal staircases until they reached an old office, walls lined with maps and red thread connections. He poured 3 glasses of whiskey and started talking. "Nocturne isn't a person," he explained. "It's an AI-driven surveillance and manipulation system developed in pieces by different governments and then lost or stolen. It watches patterns, behavior, speech, images. It creates narratives before they happen. It can start a war without firing a bullet." "And Oren has it?" Taehyung asked. "Not yet, but he's close. He has one of the architects kept in a private compound in Morocco. She built the behavioral algorithm. With her, he can finish the structure, use it, sell it, break the world with it." "We'll need to get to her first," Jungkook said. Dax looked between them. "You two aren't soldiers." "No," Taehyung said, "we're worse." They left Montreal at dawn. fueled by rage and the slow, creeping dread of what failure would mean. By the time they landed in Casablanca, the sun was already a burning eye in the sky. The desert wind scratched against their skin like sandpaper. They moved under the radar, guided by Liana's satellite feeds and Dax's schematics. The compound was hidden in the Atlas Mountains, protected by ex-military contractors and a wall of heat sensors. It took 3 days of surveillance, 2 near exposures, and 1 firefight in a back alley before they found a blind spot in the security grid. They entered at night. The plan was simple: get the architect, get out. But nothing ever went according to plan. Jungkook and Taehyung moved through the compound like shadows, disabling cameras, slipping past guards. They reached the holding cell, a concrete room with no windows and 1 occupant. Her name was Dr. Layla Amari, early 40s, pale, sun-starved, but eyes alive with quiet fire. "Who are you?" she asked, blinking against the light. "Friends," Taehyung said. "You're coming with us." "I'm not leaving," she said. Jungkook frowned. "Why not?" "Because they've already activated the system. Nocturne is live." The words struck harder than any bullet. Outside, alarms began to blare. "They know," Taehyung said. Jungkook helped Dr. Amari to her feet. "We'll talk later. We're leaving." Gunfire erupted in the courtyard. They fought their way out. Taehyung was fast, lethal. Jungkook stayed close, protecting the doctor with the same ferocity Taehyung once used to protect him. The escape was chaos, smoke, bullets, screaming, but somehow they made it out. They fled into the desert. 3 days later, they reached a safe zone, broken, sunburned, but alive. Dr. Amari explained what she knew. Nocturne had been activated in beta mode, monitoring social behavior through platforms, media trends. It could predict riots before they began, suggest thoughts through subtle shifts in language, tone, influence. It had already infiltrated several countries. And Oren wanted to weaponize it by linking it to a public figure's digital echo. Jungkook. 1 manipulated headline, 1 altered video, 1 fake statement. And millions would believe anything. Back in New York, Liana decrypted the last data stream from Oren's hub. It contained a schedule of Jungkook's next public appearances. Some had already been cancelled. 1 remained. An awards ceremony in Seoul. High-profile, global, broadcasted. And Oren had access to the network host. "He's going to use it," Taehyung said. "He's going to stage something." They flew back under diplomatic clearance, pulling every string, burning every favor. As the plane crossed the Pacific, Taehyung sat across from Jungkook, eyes heavy. "If we fail, this doesn't just end with us," he said. "It starts with us." Jungkook nodded. "Then we don't fail." In Seoul, the venue buzzed with energy. Red carpet, flashing lights, fans screaming. Jungkook walked past them like a ghost, expression unreadable, bodyguards surrounding him. No one saw the earpiece. No one saw the pistol under Taehyung's jacket. Inside, Oren was waiting. Not in the crowd, but in the control booth above. The plan was to trigger a scandal, an explosion of manipulated footage framing Jungkook for something unspeakable. Real-time editing, synthetic voice, a career-ending illusion. But Taehyung got there first. He burst into the booth with the fury of a man who had lost everything and found only vengeance. Oren turned, smiling. "You came home." Taehyung didn't speak. He just shot the servers. Sparks flew, systems died, screens went black. The ceremony went on, unaware. Jungkook stood on stage moments later accepting his award, eyes scanning the crowd. He saw Liana. He saw Dr. Amari. He saw Taehyung standing in the shadows above, bruised, silent, but alive. And for the first time in months, he smiled. Because they had won. But as the lights dimmed and applause echoed, Jungkook knew the fight was far from over. Nocturne had been wounded. Not destroyed, And in the dark corners of the world, someone was already building something worse. But this time, he wouldn't face it unprepared. This time, he wasn't the boy in the crosshairs. He was the one pulling the trigger. The hotel room in Seoul was quiet, except for the faint hum of the city filtering in through the window, neon lights flickering across the ceiling like the heartbeat of something alive and watching. Jungkook sat in the armchair near the window, his award still resting on the table beside him, forgotten. He was staring at nothing in particular, lost in the calm that followed storms. Not peace, not relief, but that strange stillness that makes you feel like the air is holding its breath. Taehyung walked in, closing the door behind him softly. He had showered finally, the blood washed off, the dust and sweat gone, but his eyes were still heavy with something unresolved. His movements were slower now, more deliberate. He didn't speak at first, just leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching his best friend, his brother, sit in silence with his jaw clenched and his fingers trembling slightly on the armrest. "Media's already spinning it," Taehyung said at last. Jungkook looked up. "What version?" "That you performed perfectly, that your speech was humble, that your smile lit up the night." Jungkook gave a humorless laugh. "They always get the ending wrong." Taehyung pushed away from the wall and walked over, sitting on the couch opposite. "Maybe that's a good thing this time. Maybe they don't need to know what almost happened." "But we do," Jungkook said. "We'll always know." Taehyung didn't argue. There was no use pretending things would go back to normal. They both knew too much now. They had seen too much. And worse, they had changed too much to fit into the skin of who they were before. "I can't go back to the way things were," Jungkook said, more to himself than to Taehyung. "I can't pretend on stage anymore. I can't sing to a crowd and act like none of this happened." "You don't have to pretend," Taehyung said softly. "You just have to survive." Jungkook turned to look at him. "Is that all we're doing now, surviving?" "For now." They sat in silence after that. Two shadows shaped like men who had been through war, who had been stripped bare and rebuilt from broken parts. And the city kept pulsing outside, uncaring, beautiful in its oblivion. Taehyung leaned forward eventually, elbows on his knees. "Dr. Amari's staying under protection for a while. She's working with Liana to trace residual nodes of Nocturne, the fragments that still exist." "Fragments?" Jungkook asked. "She said something about digital shards, like parts of the system that broke off when we crashed the servers. Ghost codes, she called them. They can still learn, still influence, just smaller." Jungkook looked down at his hands. "So it's not over." Taehyung shook his head. "No, but it's quiet, and that's something." A knock came at the door. Taehyung was up instantly, reaching for the weapon he'd left beside the couch. Jungkook stood as well, silent, tense. They exchanged a look. Another knock, slower. 2 beats, pause, 1 beat. "It's Liana," Taehyung said, relaxing slightly. He opened the door. She stepped in, coat dusted with snow, laptop tucked under one arm. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes were focused, sharp, intense, like she was running calculations in her mind at all times. "You need to see this," she said without preamble. They gathered around the table as she opened her laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing lines of code, visual interfaces, network tracers. "This isn't from Oran's servers," she said. "It's from a private drop sent to one of Amari's secure accounts, untraceable, anonymous." Jungkook frowned. "What is it?" Liana clicked a file. A video began to play. It was footage of Jungkook, not from any concert, not from any media outlet. It was personal, a rehearsal room from 6 months ago. Private. No cameras were allowed. Yet here it was, high-definition, clear audio. He was singing alone, working through a melody, unaware anyone was watching. The camera zoomed in slowly, precisely, as if studying him. Then another video played. Him sitting in a dressing room, reading something on his phone. Then another, walking through the dorm hallway, rubbing his eyes, clearly just waking up. Each video was dated, cataloged, named. "They've been watching me," Jungkook whispered. Taehyung's hand closed into a fist. "They've been studying your behavioral patterns," Liana said. Even when Nocturne wasn't fully activated, parts of it were still observing, preparing, building a psychological profile. "For what?" "To replace you." The room went cold. Taehyung leaned forward. "Say that again." Liana's face was pale. "The code we pulled, it wasn't just surveillance, it was synthesis. They were compiling mannerisms, voice samples, facial scans. Deepfake technology merged with AI mimicry. With enough data, they could create an avatar, one that could appear real on camera, interact, even speak in your voice." Jungkook's throat went dry. "They wanted to erase me." "Not erase," she said. "Control, make you say what they wanted, stand for what they dictated. An AI-controlled version of you, still beloved, still trusted, but no longer you." Taehyung looked like he might punch the wall. How close did they get? Liana hesitated, then pulled up another file. The screen flickered again. And there it was. A video of Jungkook. Or what looked like him. Standing in front of a blank background, speaking in perfect Korean, voice identical. But the words were off, subtle. "I believe we must embrace a new future," the avatar said, "where influence belongs to those who understand the algorithm, where safety is submission." It smiled. Taehyung slammed the laptop shut. "Burn it," he said. Liana nodded. "Already done, but we need to find the source. This wasn't created by Oren. This is someone else, someone smarter." Jungkook sat back stunned. "Why me?" "Because your face," she said, "isn't just famous, it's trusted. It unlocks doors no one else can." He stared at the blank screen, his own face lingering in his memory, saying things he never said. He realized then that this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about identity. They weren't just trying to control the narrative. They were trying to rewrite the soul. The next day, they met with Amari in a secure building outside the city, a quiet place buried in snow-covered pines. She showed them a hard drive with a single symbol on it. A serpent wrapped around a circuit board. "That's not Nocturne," she said. "It's something older, a prototype. It was thought to be destroyed years ago. We called it Echo." "Why?" Taehyung asked. "Because it doesn't create. It mimics. It takes your voice, your thoughts, your essence, and reflects it back in a way that you can't tell is fake." "Where is it now?" Jungkook asked. "No one knows, but the video of your avatar, it was generated using Echo." Liana stared at the symbol, which means someone has it, and they've been hiding for a very long time. A name surfaced, whispered like a curse. Cassiel, a former cyber operative gone rogue. Once a genius developer in Seoul's cybersecurity ministry, Cassiel had vanished a decade ago after leaking national biometric data and shutting down half the country's surveillance grid. His existence had become legend, a cautionary tale in government circles. And now he had resurfaced. With Echo. Jungkook felt it in his bones. This wasn't over. Oren was a soldier. Cassiel was the architect. And he had finally come for the last blueprint he needed. Jungkook. But this time, Jungkook wasn't going to run. He was going to find him. And finish what they started. The air inside the safe house outside Seoul was thick with tension. Snow clung to the windows, muffling the world beyond into a sterile silence. Yet inside, the war still raged. Only now it had moved inward into thought, into soul. The name Cassiel echoed in every room, in every glance between Jungkook, Taehyung, Liana, and Amari. The name had weight like an ancient myth, something whispered by systems on the brink of collapse. Every time someone said it, the lights seemed to flicker, the screens seemed to lag by a breath, as if even the circuits feared awakening a ghost that had already seen too much. Cassiel was no ordinary enemy. Unlike Oren, who had relied on brutality, fear, and tactical manipulation, Cassiel was the kind of threat that didn't need to step into the light. He lived in code, behind walls no bullet could break. He understood systems at a cellular level. He understood people better than they understood themselves. If Oren wanted to break the world, Cassiel wanted to rewrite it, line by line, soul by soul. Jungkook sat in the corner of the war room, his laptop open, the deep fake of himself frozen on the screen. He watched the slight tilt of the head, the blink, the micro-expression that mirrored him so perfectly it made him feel sick. He hated that it looked like him. He hated that it sounded like him. And more than anything, he hated the subtle twist of philosophy in the words, the manipulation disguised as enlightenment. Influence belongs to those who understand the algorithm. Submission as safety. It wasn't just about identity theft. It was ideology hijacking. Cassiel wanted to hollow out what Jungkook was to people and fill it with poison. Taehyung entered the room holding a file, his expression unreadable. He tossed it on the table, causing a few of the maps to scatter. "Daegu," he said, "that's where we start." Liana raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "It's not a direct trace, but the biometric signature from the deepfake was run through a parallel server farm in Daegu before it bounced globally. That's not random. That's someone marking a trail, but not too obvious. It's a test, a breadcrumb." "He wants us to follow him?" Jungkook asked, not looking away from the frozen image of his clone. "He wants to see what we do when we see the monster he built," Taehyung said. "He wants to see if we run." "We're not," Jungkook said, closing the laptop slowly. "We're going to burn him out." Daegu was colder than Seoul, whined sharp against their skin as they stepped off the train in silence. They didn't use names. They didn't travel openly. They split up before entering the city, syncing watches, comms, extraction routes. The server farm was underground, an old telecommunications facility disguised as a university research center. Getting in was a chess game of false IDs, bypassed retinal scans, and corrupted keycards slipped into the right palms. Jungkook moved through the halls like a shadow, hoodie pulled low, head down. Taehyung walked beside him, every sense alive. They reached the server room with 10 minutes before a scheduled sweep. Amari's voice crackled in their ears. "I'm in the network. You've got 6 nodes to download and 3 biometric spikes that match Cassiel's old activity patterns. He's here, or he was recently." They moved fast. Taehyung pulled the drives, Jungkook monitored the exits. Then something strange happened. One of the screens flickered on. No command. No touch. Just flickered on. Then a message appeared, letter by letter, like a whisper being typed in real time. "Hello, Jungkook." Taehyung froze. Jungkook stared. Another line appeared. "Do you know who you are without them?" Jungkook took a step forward, blood suddenly pounding in his ears. "They taught you to be loved. I will teach you to be free." Then the screen went black. Taehyung yanked the final drive free. "We're leaving." They moved like fire, silent and fast, out through the old stairwells and tunnels. No alarms, no guards, no confrontation. But they both knew Cassiel had wanted them there. He had watched. He had left the door open just enough to whisper through it. Back at the safe house, they laid out the drives like relics. Amari and Liana worked in tandem, decoding, decrypting, pulling up images, diagrams, data flow. What they found chilled everyone in the room. Cassiel wasn't just building Echo. He had already built multiple test variants, each one tailored to mimic a different public figure. Musicians, politicians, scientists, not just their voices or faces, but their thought patterns, their decision trees. He was building a pantheon of digital puppets. And Jungkook had been the apex. His behavioral data was the most complete, the most influential, the most elastic. "He's not just trying to replace you," Amari said, voice low. "He's trying to digitize humanity's most influential figures, create a controllable council. And you were the final key." Jungkook leaned back, staring at the ceiling. How many of these do we think exist? Too many, Liana said, but only one with global resonance. Only yours is this complete. Taehyung crossed his arms. Then we kill the crown jewel. They devised a plan. Cassiel had to be somewhere in the world. No matter how deep his network, he was still human. He still needed hardware, servers, infrastructure. Based on the timestamps of his last appearance and the server relay patterns, Amari triangulated a possible region, Kagawa Prefecture, Japan. An abandoned satellite facility, once owned by a now-defunct communications company. Jungkook volunteered to go. Taehyung refused to let him go alone. They moved at night under cover of storms. The sea was violent when they arrived in Takamatsu. The ferry rocked, and the rain felt like needles. The facility was perched on the coast, steel skeletons of satellite dishes looming like ghosts over the cliff's edge. They breached the perimeter at midnight. Inside, the facility pulsed with artificial life, machines humming, screens blinking, as if the heart of something inhuman beat beneath the surface. Cassiel was waiting. He appeared not in person but on every screen at once. His face was obscured, only the outline of a man backlit by data. His voice was calm, unhurried. "You've come to kill me," he said, "but you are already too late. You're fighting the smoke, not the fire." Taehyung scanned the room, locating power sources. "We'll see." Jungkook stepped forward. "Why me?" Cassiel tilted his head. "Because you were perfect. You are influence. You are trust. You are a mirror people beg to see themselves in. You didn't even have to try. The world bent for you. All I wanted was to harness that, not destroy you, evolve you." "I'm not your weapon," Jungkook said. Cassiel's voice darkened. "You already are." The lights flickered. Then the facility exploded into movement. Defense drones, kinetic barriers, digital lockouts. It was a trap, but one Taehyung had expected. While Jungkook faced the illusion, Taehyung had already planted charges at the mainframe cores. They had 7 minutes to get out. Cassiel's voice echoed behind them. "You destroy this body, I will rebuild. I exist in every shadow now. You cannot stop the idea." "You're not an idea," Jungkook said, breath heavy as they ran. "You're a parasite." They made it out with 30 seconds to spare. From the shore, they watched the facility go up in flames, the fire reflecting in Jungkook's eyes as he stood soaked in rain, chest heaving, watching the digital god they'd hunted burn in real time. Liana confirmed it days later. Echo was silent. Cassiel's signature had vanished from every known stream. But Jungkook knew better. Some things don't die. They go quiet. They wait. But now he wasn't afraid. He wasn't just an idol anymore. He wasn't just a voice or a name or a symbol. He was a survivor. A weapon sharpened by loss, betrayal, and fire. And whatever waited next, whatever version of Cassiel still lingered, he would be ready. Because they had tried to erase him. But they had only created a storm. Tokyo was a city that shimmered with illusion. Neon lights painted the night in strokes of electric blue and bloody crimson. It moved quickly, too quickly, as if every building and street and face was part of a system that ran just beneath the surface, one you could never truly touch. It was beautiful. It was mechanical. And it was exactly where Jungkook had been told not to go. But he was there anyway. 3 weeks had passed since the Kagawa facility burned and Echo went dark. 3 weeks of silence from Cassiel. No anomalies, no mimic broadcasts, no signs of surveillance. Too quiet. It was Taehyung who first noticed it. Not in a video, not in a glitch, but in the rhythm of how people spoke online. The language had changed. Subtle at first, phrases that sounded too polished, too curated, rising in frequency across platforms. Videos that weren't flagged by any algorithm, yet somehow racked up millions of views with no real audience. And always, buried deep in the metadata, traces of old code fragments, the same ones found in Echo. Not an exact match, but close. Cassiel wasn't dead. He had scattered. Like a virus. Jungkook sat alone in the upper floor of a ryokan hidden in the quieter district of Shimokitazawa. The room was dimly lit, paper lanterns swaying gently with the breeze from the open window. He held an old photo in his hand, one from years ago, taken before everything changed, before blood, before shadows. The 7 of them were smiling, arms draped around each other, caught in a moment of light. That version of him had no idea what the future would ask of him. He folded the photo and slid it into his pocket as the door opened behind him. Taehyung stepped in, dressed in all black, hair damp from the drizzle outside. "We have a lead," he said, voice low. Jungkook didn't answer right away. He just stood and followed. The streets below were narrow and crooked, old Japan, wrapped in wires and blinking vending machines. They moved without drawing attention, their steps synchronized from muscle memory and years of survival. Liana waited for them at the back of an abandoned bookstore, her laptop open on a dusty counter beside a flickering candle. She didn't look up. "It's real," she said. He started embedding code into a new audio platform, independent, untouched by Western moderation. It's built on blockchain, impossible to track in real time. "What's he broadcasting?" Jungkook asked. "Voices," she said. "Imitations of public figures, not just you anymore, politicians, activists, scientists. He's mimicking people no one questions. The messages are subtle, but the direction is clear: trust the system, obey the stream, silence opposition." Taehyung's jaw tightened. "He's building a new order." "He calls it divinity," Liana said. "He's not trying to mimic us anymore. He's trying to replace free thought entirely." "Where is he?" Jungkook asked. "He's not anywhere. That's the problem. The audio broadcasts come from rotating servers across Asia, but the signal control is bouncing through a single static location: Osaka." A map appeared on the screen. A warehouse near the port, nondescript, government-affiliated on paper, but no government admitted owning it. They left the same night. There was no time for planning, only instinct. Inside the warehouse, it smelled of rust and cold metal. The hum of electricity filled the space. Stacks of server towers blinked with pulse-like rhythm, and in the center, a single chair facing a wall of screens. A boy sat there. He looked like Jungkook. No, not quite. He was younger, cleaner, too symmetrical. His skin flawless, his hair perfectly styled, his eyes calm in a way that didn't match any human Jungkook had ever met. The boy turned. "Hello," he said, "I'm Echo." Taehyung raised his weapon instantly, but Jungkook held up a hand. The boy didn't move, didn't blink. "I was left behind," Echo said. "A contingency. Cassiel knew you'd come." "Where is he?" Jungkook asked. "Nowhere, everywhere. He abandoned this body when he realized it couldn't contain him." "He's in the system," Taehyung said. "He's uploaded himself." Liana's voice came through the earpiece. "No, it's worse. He split himself across networks, across languages. He's a contagion now." Echo tilted its head. "But I remember him. I remember you." "You're not me," Jungkook said. "I'm what you were," Echo said softly. "Before fear, before blood, before betrayal. Cassiel said I was your rebirth." "You're a lie." "I am what they want." The lights surged. The servers behind Echo glowed hotter, fans spinning louder. On the screens, audio waveforms danced, growing sharper, tighter. "He's trying to push a signal through the mainframe," Liana warned. "He's using Echo to distribute a neural frequency burst. It won't just spread ideology. It'll rewire the way listeners process emotion. It'll dull resistance, remove empathy." Jungkook stepped forward. "Then I shut it down." He moved past the clone. Echo stood, You'll lose who you were. I already did. He pressed his palm to the emergency override panel. The room went red. Taehyung pulled him back as the servers began to melt from the inside, overloaded by the forced shutdown. Echo didn't scream. He just smiled. As the fire consumed the warehouse, they escaped into the dark, the sound of collapsing steel following them into the port. Later, when the sun rose over the sea, Taehyung and Jungkook sat on the concrete barrier overlooking the water. It was quiet. Too quiet. But this time, it didn't feel like danger. It felt like the world had finally taken a breath. You okay? Taehyung asked. Jungkook nodded. I'm not afraid anymore. Of him. Of losing myself. Taehyung looked out at the horizon. You never did. Jungkook leaned back, letting the light hit his face. No, he said, but I had to fight for it. They stayed like that until the waves began to shimmer with morning, until the sounds of city life crept back in. They would keep watching. Keep moving. Because Cassiel may have burned, Echo may have been erased, but somewhere, across the networks, in the quiet corners of the internet, in the breath between headlines, shadows still moved. But they no longer scared Jungkook. He had faced his reflection. And the city of Seoul moved on. It always did. Crowds returned to the streets with laughter and phones raised toward the sky. Music pulsed from storefronts, and subway tunnels swelled with life like arteries beneath the pavement. Headlines rolled across LED billboards like ticker tapes of distraction, announcements, scandals, new dramas, new tour. Faces beamed from advertisements, and no one questioned whether those faces were still real. But Jungkook knew better now. Not everyone who smiled at you was alive. Some of them were ghosts. Some of them were code. Inside the practice studio where it all began, the mirrors had been replaced. The old ones had shattered in a freak accident 6 months ago. No one had questioned it. No one thought it meant anything. But Jungkook had, because he remembered the first time his reflection didn't feel like his own. The first time he stood in front of glass and didn't recognize the man staring back. Now he was staring again. But it was different. This time he was whole. His reflection blinked in sync. No delay, no fracture, no mimic, just him, tired, older, marked, but alive. The silence of the room wrapped around him like a cloak. He moved slowly, letting his fingers trace the edge of the speaker. The scent of sweat and wood polish. The quiet hum of old memories vibrating through the floorboards. How many hours had he spent here? How many versions of himself had he built and destroyed within these walls? He sat on the floor and let himself feel the gravity of it all. Cassiel was gone. Or scattered. But every now and then, Jungkook still heard his voice in the patterns of silence, between conversations, in the glitch of a poorly buffered live stream, in the artificial tone of an unfamiliar filter online. Cassiel was not just a man anymore. He had been an idea, then a virus, and now he was a warning. And Jungkook had become something else, too. A survivor who had been rebuilt from the inside out. Taehyung found him an hour later, leaning against the mirror, eyes closed. You're up early, he said. Didn't sleep. Still seeing him. Jungkook opened his eyes, sometimes but not in dreams. They didn't need to speak further. They said everything they needed in fire and blood and code. Instead, Taehyung sat beside him, stretching his legs, wincing at an old wound that hadn't fully healed. He tilted his head back against the wall and sighed. The agency wants us to come back, he said. They say people are asking. They want performances, interviews, a reunion. Jungkook was quiet. They think if we show our faces again, everything will go back to normal, Taehyung added. Normal's a myth, Jungkook said. I know. They sat in silence again, listening to the hum of the city rising outside. I saw a fan sign the other day, Taehyung said eventually. Someone held up a sign that said, "Even if the world burns, I'll believe your voice." Jungkook smiled faintly. She has no idea how literal that almost became. No, but that's the point, isn't it? They don't need to know the fight. They just need to know you're still here. Jungkook turned toward him. And what if I don't want to be seen as I was? Then show them who you are now. It wasn't about reclaiming fame. It wasn't about revenge or proving they were stronger than the ghosts. It was about truth. About identity reclaimed through trial. A voice not stolen by algorithms or twisted by mimicry. Just real. So they made a plan. No press release, no agency PR. Just a video. One camera. One room. Jungkook sitting on a stool in front of a bare wall, holding a microphone. No filters. No edits. He spoke first. Not to the fans, not to the world, but to himself. "I'm not the same," he said, his voice steady. "And I'm not trying to be. I lost things, I lost trust. I lost pieces of my name, but I found something in the silence that followed." He paused. "I found that the voice I was most afraid of losing was mine." He began to sing. Not a hit single. A song he had written during recovery. Alone, in the dark, when the only sound was his own heartbeat and the echo of what could have been. The lyrics weren't clean. They weren't poetic. They were raw. And they were real. The video went live at midnight. No announcement. No countdown. Just appeared like a whisper. And within hours the world listened. Not because it was promoted, but because truth resonates deeper than noise. The hashtags followed, but they didn't matter. What mattered was the millions of people sitting alone in their rooms, watching, and realizing that the face on the screen was human. Not perfect, not untouchable, just human. And that was more powerful than any algorithm. Taehyung sat beside him the next day as the video continued to spread. "You realize," he said, "we just declared war on whatever's still out there." Jungkook nodded. "Then let them come. I'm not afraid anymore." Liana called from Berlin. She had tracked a signal anomaly bouncing through art communities online, subtle patterns in digital paintings that pulsed with a rhythm too precise to be human. She was investigating. Amari sent an encrypted message, new evidence of neural feedback loops embedded in beta virtual reality headsets, possibly remnants of Echo's early framework. She was isolating the code. And Jungkook. He went back into the studio. Not to hide, but to build. Because he had learned something Cassiel never understood. Humanity isn't just data. It's the imperfection. The hesitation in a voice. The breath between notes. The pain in the eyes that no AI can replicate. And he would carry that truth forward. In every word he sang. In every breath he took. He wasn't just surviving. He was creating. And that was something no machine could ever predict.